Hey everybody, welcome to Halloween in the Archie-verse, presented by I Read YA and Scholastic. My name is Alex Segura. I am the co-president of Archie Comics. I'm also the author of Star Wars Poe Dameron Freefall. And because I want to spare you the chore of listening to me read bios, I'm going to have each of our amazing panelists introduce themselves and talk about their upcoming or current Archie work. So Stephanie, do you want to go first since we're kind of in the Brady Bunch motif here?
Marcia. So hi, I'm Stephanie Kate Strohm. I'm the author of Restless Hearts, which is a Katy Keene prequel novel. And it follows Katy, Jorge, Pepper, and Josie 5 years before the start of the show in a fall adventure, September, mostly in New York City.
Awesome. Caleb.
Hi, I am Caleb Roehrig, and I am the author of A Werewolf in Riverdale. I'm sorry, I wish that I had a physical copy with me, but I'm away right now. A Werewolf in Riverdale is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It is inspired by the Archie horror series Jughead the Hunger, and it is about a bunch of hirsute beasts stalking the streets of Riverdale by the light of the full moon. It is sort of my take on how that story came to be.
Awesome. But Micol, I feel like a teacher.
My books are too far away to reach.
It's okay. You've written a lot of them.
Ostow. I am a YA author. I'm the author of the first 4 of the books from Scholastic, the first 4 Riverdale novels, a prequel, and 3 mysteries featuring your favorite characters. Stories that take place in between the seasons, give you a little bit of extra Riverdale fun, and they are now in this beautiful box set that you can kind of see behind me just in time for your holiday shopping. And I also get to write Riverdale comics and now graphic novels for Alex at Archie. So that's what I do, and it's a lot of fun.
And Sarah has shown up in her Halloween garb, which is awesome. You get extra credit today.
Thank you. I will appreciate this extra credit. Hello, my name is Sarah Rees Brennan, and I don't normally dress this way to everyone's relief. I'm the author of the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina tie-in novels, starting with Season of the Witch, which is a prequel in which Sabrina is, worried about becoming a witch and gets into trouble with her cousin Ambrose. And then it's followed by Daughter of Chaos, a New Year's Adventure, and Path of Night, about, little problems like my boyfriend won't text me back because he's in hell. They're all a lot of fun to write, and I'm excited to be here in the spooky season talking to you fine people.
Awesome. And Rebecca, last but not least, tell us about what you're working on, or what you worked on.
So I'm Rebecca Barrow. I wrote Interview with VIXEN, a delightful tale about a kind of alternate Riverdale that happens to be populated by vampires, and Veronica has to deal with becoming one and maybe unbecoming one. Who knows?
Yeah, these are all fantastic novels. The Scholastic and Archie relationship is something I'm immensely proud of from the Archie perspective. Just to give you such a supremely talented group of writers a chance to expand on the worlds and concepts we kicked off in the comics has really been special to see. As I was getting ready for this panel, I kind of looked at at my shelf actually, where I have all these books, and I was like, wow, this has really become something really meaningful and substantial and added to the mythos, which is great. So thank you, Scholastic, for inviting me to MC this. Thank you all for doing this. I just want to let everyone listening know or watching know that you can pick up most of these books. Well, I should also preface this. It's a Halloween panel, so if you hear children screaming, they're mine and they're fine. It's not, don't be worried. But I want to let people know that you can pick up most of these books through Children's Book World LA, except for the Katy book and the Poison Pen Riverdale book, which will be both out November 1st. And if you have questions, you can type in your questions on YouTube, and they will be sent to me through carrier pigeon, and I will try to get to them as quickly as possible. So one of the big things I want to talk about is just Archie as a pop culture idea. And I'm assuming that each of you have different stories of how you first came to interact with these characters, beyond just getting the assignment to write the book. So if you can talk to me a little bit about, what's your Archie origin story? What was your first experience reading Archie, and what kind of a fan were you? And we'll take it from there. Anyone can jump in.
I'll start.
Okay.
My dad is dyslexic, and growing up, it was much easier for him to read comic books than it was, chapter books. So he always really wanted to get me into comic books. And we started with superheroes, and I wasn't that into them. And then he handed me a Betty and Veronica double digest, and I just fell completely in love with everything Archie, especially Betty Cooper. So my childhood bedroom was just filled with as many Archie comics as I could possibly get my hands on. I loved the whole gang, and I loved all these stories so much. So I actually knew about Katy Keene before the show on the CW, because sometimes there would be Katy Keene in some of the older issues of Archie. So Archie has kind of been part of my life ever since I first became a reader, and it started as something that me and my dad could share. And so getting to write this book and being part of the Archie universe myself has been really special for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, one of my first Archie comic was a B&V double digest. I think it was issue 14 or 13, but I just remember that was it, and I was hooked. And I learned a lot about English, just reading in English from Archie. So it's really a doorway to so many different things. But what about you, Caleb?
Actually, so I also grew up reading Archie. My dad grew up reading Archie, and when we were kids, my dad traveled a lot for work, and whenever he would go on a business trip, the tradition was when he would come home, he would buy an Archie comic at the airport for me and my brother and my sister. So it was something that we shared as a family. And I still have this massive collection of Archie comics. I have the comic books, we have the double digests, we have all the specials. And it is huge. We have a massive collection, all three of us. And so it was a major part of my, it was sort of very formative for me in terms of storytelling. But also I was a very artsy kid, and I learned how to draw by sort of copying pictures out of the Archie comics. So it was really big for me in terms of my creative expression, and it meant so much. I mean, I absolutely sought this project out. When I saw that Archie Comics had licensed their intellectual property to Scholastic, I told my agent, I said, I want to be a part of this. I don't care what it takes. So
That's great.
Yeah, this was something I reached out for and grabbed with both hands.
Yeah, no, and you have such a great take on the characters. Was there a particular character you liked to draw the best as a kid, or?
Yeah. Yeah, Betty. Betty was absolutely my favorite. Yeah, I totally. There was something about the girl next door who, because she was very, she was the girl next door, but she wasn't always very sweet. She had a good sense of humor, and I couldn't.
Yeah, Betty has a little bit of a dark side. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Rebecca? What's that?
In a way, with a wrench, she was such a awesome mechanic,
and super independent. Yeah. How about you, Rebecca? What was your first experience with Archie?
So I didn't really grow up with Archie so much. I don't know that I really saw it here, but there was one time I went on a family trip to Barbados, where my family is from. There was a family wedding, and we ended up staying. It was a comedy of errors with where we were supposed to be staying with a family member, and it all went wrong. And we ended up in this really fancy hotel. It's the fanciest place I've ever stayed to this day. And I was 6 years old, so it's not looking great for me. But that is where I first read Archie. Just for those 2 weeks, I read Archie, and what I remember from that is that I learned the word matinee. And I didn't know what it meant, but I walked around the pool with my Barbie, we're going to a matinee. And I vividly remember this woman looking at me like, what a strange little child. But yeah, she's having the time of her life, so just let her be.
Yeah, I think I learned what upchuck meant from an Archie comic, because it's such a polite way of saying puke, and it took me a second to figure it out. But yeah, I mean, they're very much more educational than that example, but that's funny. What about you, Sarah?
Well, and might I add, you're all extremely interesting because Thackeray Binks here has been watching in fascination, and he doesn't usually. Also,
nice.
there is the sound of any children. They're not mine, and there's probably not fine. What are they doing in my house? Who can say? Anyway, I, like most people here, found comics through my dad because my dad is a huge troll. So I'd be watching Smallville and he'd be like, oh, that's how Clark Kent and Lex Luthor ended up having a baby. And I'd be like, what? And I was watching Sabrina the Teenage Witch in the same way. And he'd be like, I'm just going to drop some knowledge and then mosey on out. And I was obsessed with Sabrina the Teenage Witch when I was a little, because, as you can see, I like a witch. I like the idea of girls having power. And I love an untraditional family, a family where you're like, this shouldn't work, but it really does. So and as fans do, once you have access to anything that you love, you're just like, now I will have all of it, all of it. Exactly. So I read all of the comics, and then I was like, more. And finally, I feel like once Riverdale started, I was like, I have more. And then literally when I was asked to do this, I didn't understand I was being asked to do it because I just kept being like, yeah, I'm really excited for the show. And they're like, do you want to be involved? And I was like, yeah, I really want to watch it. And they're like, no.
That's great. Micol, I know you've been a diehard Archie fan since for a while now, but I don't think I've heard your origin story, or if there are any like gags or specific stories that you liked as a reader or as a kid.
It's not that great. I mean, the hot take is that it was my mom and not my dad. And that was mainly because, you know, it was the 70s and feminism was, you know, however many years behind where it is now. So she was the one dragging me on all these errands. So if we went to the supermarket, then the way that she would keep me quiet would be she'd buy me a digest, and she would take me to all my orthodonture appointments. And the only good thing about going to the orthodontist was he had all of the Archies. So like it didn't matter that he always kept us waiting for at least 45 minutes because I got to read Archie for 45 minutes. So so unfortunately it's kind of associated with these like unpleasant experiences as a child, but the point was that was what was so thrilling, like all of these sort of like boring, mundane experiences, these domestic things that you just kind of had to do. I was like, but Archie's there, you know, and I heard that there was going to be a TV show, and I was like, and I heard it was going to be edgy. And, you know, of course, that's like the buzzword, like, let's just make everything edgy now. So, you know, I wasn't sure what to expect. And I actually, I had been watching, I guess, the CW one Friday night. For whatever reason, my family was leaving me alone, left the room, came back, and it had rolled into the Riverdale pilot. This was when it first premiered, and it had just gone straight into the Riverdale pilot. So I didn't know exactly what on earth I was watching, but as I watched, I was like, this is crazy. Like a few days later, I got an email from Scholastic saying, you know, we know you love pop culture. We know you love horror and mysteries. Like I had just done Mean Girls for them, which is the exact opposite, but I had gotten to know my editor really well. She was like, so I thought of you for Riverdale. And I was like, I mean, the only thing I know about Riverdale other than like devouring the digests at the orthodontist is that Veronica was wearing that amazing cape the other night. And I called my agent and she was like, you have to do it. It's my favorite show. So here we are.
Yeah, and I think that was a great segue into my next question. A lot of these books kind of have to weave into pre-existing continuity. Stephanie, you had to kind of set things up before the show even started, a prequel, and the Sabrina and Riverdale novels have to find little spaces to tell the story. I had to deal with this a little bit with the Star Wars book. You have this giant scope of narrative, and you have to kind of cherry pick what works. What are some? Can you talk a little bit about the process for the novels based on the shows, and some of the challenges and how you found ways to tell the story you wanted to tell with what you were given?
Well, I would be curious to hear other people's experiences because for me specifically, I've been tying in with the TV show, and I know, like for instance, with Werewolf and Vampironica, it's not, you know, it's not so time sensitive or however you want to say that. And we've been fortunate enough that we get to have a phone call with the showrunners at the beginning, or one sad person's thrown into the volcano to talk to me. That's their job. But they give us the story beats, and so we get a sense of where it's going. And we do our best to write a story that parallels and maybe take some of the themes. And like what we're looking for is, you know, you can't be too married to any one plot point because it could change. I mean, we're all creators. We all know, like, you have an outline. It can be as meticulous as you want it to be. By the time you get to the end of your book, it's, for me at least, it's almost always different. So you have to give them leeway to change. So no matter what they tell us on our call, we have to be prepared to pivot. So, you know, so I'm always kind of like listening for those little in-between spaces. I think, Sarah, you mentioned liminal spaces. I'm always looking for those in-between spaces of like, there's a storyline that never got quite as much attention as I would have liked to see, and then follow that so that you can read it in conjunction with the show. But also, if you never happen to see the show, it's, I mean, maybe you'll miss like one or two inside jokes, but you're still going to be able to follow the book. So I'm just curious there have been a few close calls where we were given some pretty strong assurance that things were going one way, and then maybe they took a left turn, and I was like, oh, cool, you know, at the very last minute. And it was very make it work, which is, you know, part of the gig. So I just wonder if others have had that.
What about you, Stephanie or Sarah?
Yeah, so I started writing this Katy Keene book before the show started airing. So first I got all of the scripts, and it was like, under lock and key, do not let anybody see them. So it was really exciting for me to read them all first. And then midway through the process, I got to watch the episodes, which was so helpful because obviously it was important to have the scripts, but I feel like I learned so much more about the characters, being able to hear the actors speak the lines out loud. And also, like Micol said, I had to like sometimes rearrange stuff midway through rounds of revisions. Like, now we know that Kevin is in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon, so he can't be in New York right now. You got to switch that around. Or like, oh, now we have like Katy and Veronica met up at the bar, so we have to like put a reference into that. So as new episodes of Riverdale came out, I would have to go back and kind of change things in the prequel to make sure that everything lined up and was canon with what has been established in the show.
Yeah, it's a unique kind of aspect to, I guess, licensed IP writing. You have to be nimble, but then also kind of try to retain the heart of the story. Sarah, I'm sure you had some fun process stuff going on with the Sabrina books as well.
Oh, definitely. I, like Stephanie, got to read the scripts before they were aired, and that was really fun, but it was really hard for me. I love talking, as you can see. So I would read the scripts and be like, oh, I have so much knowledge. I can't share it. At one point, I was reading a script on an airplane, and I did a real-life spit take. I spat water out onto the head of the man in front of me. And I was like, okay. And the airplane hostess came and was like, are you all right? What's upset you? And I was like, can't say it. Signed, non-disclosure. But yeah, as everyone was saying, I do think that this is about liminal spaces and being like, oh, well, what makes that character act that way? What could have happened in the in-between times? We know time does pass. And so in a way, it's like an endarkened liminal space, and it's our job to like bring a lantern to it. So you're like, oh, and then hopefully if the story feels even richer to people. And that's kind of an amazing job, to be the lantern bearer. But I also agree with Stephanie that seeing the actors do their thing, you're like, oh, I know now. And I did reach out to a bunch of the actors in Sabrina. I was like, hey, what are your thoughts on your character? What are your thoughts on their backstory? I'll just put in the book. And later I was told I absolutely shouldn't have done that. It's completely wrong.
Yeah, my inner red flag just went up as you were telling that story, but I'm glad it all worked out.
I mean, I think some people fully were like, oh, a maniac. Shut up, you're responding. Some people did. And that, so I feel like their backstories in the books are extra special. And thank you for that. I'm very sorry. I didn't know that wasn't okay.
It's fine. Rebecca and Caleb, one thing that I'm really excited about is, you know, with the Archie horror books is you get a little more leeway because you're basically taking concepts like Vampironica and Jughead the Hunger and extrapolating kind of what you want and reimagining it a new way to kind of fit the format. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that process for you. You know, did you kind of dive into the source material and become like a student of Jughead the Hunger and Vampironica, or was it more just a tonal thing? And what were some of the challenges you faced to putting those together?
Well, so for me, the part of the challenge was it was sort of like the expansiveness of the
Right.
assignment presented a challenge in itself because they sort of said to me, they were like, here's the source material. You don't have to completely stick to it. And part of it was because those titles were still being written. So even as I was kind of crafting my version of that story, they were still writing onto it. So anything that I was going to create was subject to change anyway. And the authors are going to keep writing more and more, no matter what I put into it. So however, the series begins with a little bit of exposition with some backstory telling about some things that happened prior to all the events that sort of unfold from that point forward. And I thought, well, what if I tell that story? What if I write kind of an origin story? I go back and write something that would function as a prequel to Jughead the Hunger. And they sort of give a list of these, a list of people that have died who have been killed by the werewolves in Riverdale. And I said, well, okay, well, what if I tell that story and I take these victims and I basically took a list of dead bodies and I built a story around it. And so, but I had a lot of leeway. They gave me a lot of freedom in terms of where I was allowed to go with that, because it didn't have to necessarily conform to canon, because all of that was going to change anyway, and they knew that when it was coming out. So I really did. I was allowed to do a lot with that, which was, as a writer, it was very nice. It was nice to have a lot of elbow room.
That's good. I'm happy to hear that. Yeah,
and I got to kind of focus on. I got to take characters that I loved and feed them to monsters, and that's that's what I love to do. So
yeah.
Make the most
the
of
gift
it.
that keeps on giving.
But I really got to sort of roll up my sleeves and dig into these characters that have been a part of my life for such a long time, and to sort of focus on just telling a story that was going to be exciting and also maybe a little scary, but also funny. So it was good.
Yeah, and Rebecca, for the idea, the Vampironica's concept is, it's pretty self-explanatory. She's now a vampire, so that's a great springboard, and you handled it so well, and kind of giving it so it's texturally different, I think, than the comics in a great way. It just feels like its own meaningful universe. So I'd love to hear more about how you kind of came to that space while working on it.
I got the same. I was given I was given Vampironica to read, and I kind of took the beginning and the very end, and then the middle is where I really expanded and built in a lot more on the friendships and the relationships and the relationship with her parents as well, because I didn't want it to just be like, oh, Veronica's now a vampire and oh no, some random stuff happens. It's like there's some fundamental family and relationship and self-knowing herself and who is she really, especially now she's a monster. What does that add to all of it? And it was really fun to get to not only have the horror and the fun element of there's vampires in Riverdale, but also what does it mean to this character when she has changed so much and become someone different to who she thought she was. So that's quite my style. So I merged my style with the Vampironica aspect and came out with something that I hope was enjoyable.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I just want to remind all the fans watching this live, you can ask questions, just type them up over on YouTube. And we have gotten one that is, I think, great and anyone can answer. It's from Devilish Aggie, and they ask, what would your ideas be for a crossover novel, and who would they involve? If you had any choice, you could choose anyone in the Archie universe. Who would you want to write a crossover novel about?
I think
no pressure.
Mine and Caleb's would easily cross over.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Oh, absolutely.
I'd love them to go head to head.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that ours would be an easy crossover, and I think we could also include Sabrina very easily.
Yeah, you could just do a horror trifecta, a trilogy of crossovers.
I think. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
easily to horror because it has all of these gothic elements. And really, I watched the pilot and was like, Jughead is dead. He's a ghost. He's narrating this. And everyone's like, that's not what's happening. I was like, I'm a writer. I know things. I can intuit what's going on. I was very wrong, as we all now know. But I was still into the idea of Jughead as a sexy ghost. And one of you guys should write that.
Maybe you should write it.
Maybe I will.
Yeah. I think one of the cool things, just hearing about all these stories and also seeing how the characters themselves have evolved over the last decade, is that the IP is flexible. Like the characters we met as kids were, entertaining, very sitcomish in the stories, but over the last decade, I think you can kind of attribute it to Archie CEO John Goldwater really opening it up and saying these characters are who they are. You can put them in any setting, and really, it's still Archie. You can have Archie in a zombie apocalypse. You can have Veronica as a vampire, Sabrina in this kind of psychological horror. So I just want to talk. I want to talk less process and more kind of, oh wow, I can do this. And what was it like dealing with these great iconic characters and putting them in these insane situations, or in the case of Katy and Riverdale, just more modern takes? I don't want to have to call on people.
Yeah. Honestly, it's really a lot of fun. Like, all of my feelings about the Archie-verse are so affectionate. And so, like, even when they're doing awful things to each other, which is obviously my favorite part about Riverdale, because I love horror, I love mysteries, I love things that, as Sarah says, are gothic and spooky. And but even when they're doing that, it's just Cheryl, I was participating in the panel for Comic-Con the other week where they were showing the sort of like clips from last season, and there was that amazing shot of Cheryl with like the old-timey cherry red gas mask on her face. Like, what is that? I don't know where that came from, or I know like literally where it came from, but it's just a ton of fun to be like a part of such an audacious and genre blending and just really unfettered. Like, everyone is just so unrestrained with Riverdale. But then also, so the property itself is so much fun to work with because the material is so extraordinary and unique. But then also, like, to be able to go to my parents and, anybody sort of above a certain age who doesn't totally understand my job. Like, they see a book, but they don't understand when I'm working because it looks a lot like, sitting and staring off into space or whatever. And saying, oh, this is Riverdale. It's based on Archie comics. And their faces light up because they all recognize it. So to be sort of part of something that's so incredibly forward thinking and creative with so much opportunity for us as writers and creators, and then also something that's so at the same time like nostalgic. It's just really, I find it really, really, really exhilarating.
Awesome.
Yeah, audacious in all areas. And here's Sabrina's cousin, and he's kind of dodgy, and he's confined to the house because he did a big crime, and he's pansexual. And you're like, oh, is he gonna betray? No, he loves her. He will lay down and die for her, and be like, to exploring the full humanity of almost inhuman creatures is such a fun thing to do. And like I said, I think it's great that Archie Comics is letting us be lantern bearers for this in all sorts of ways. I love the way
it's really
lovely.
It's super exciting. No, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say I love Theo, who is one of Sabrina's mortal friends, who has this great trans storyline. And I was reading it, I was like, are they gonna? Yes. And also I'd be like, so I have an idea, and here's another fun spell that I was looking up. And I was like, so at New Year's, you either have good luck or bad luck all year round, depending on what you do for 3 days. And of course, if you like bury like piece of rotting flesh near someone you hate's house, that will ruin their luck. And they were like, great, do all of that. I've always heard the word yes and almost never the word no. And sometimes even they were like, go harder, girl. And I was like, this is amazing. I just love the attitude.
Yeah, I think one of the things for Archie, just in general, is that as long as the characters are, true to themselves, you can put them in any kind of setting, and whether it's a classic story where it's very sitcomish in format, or it's something like Riverdale, or something really horror-driven like the Archie horror stuff. There's a lot of flexibility there. I mean, Archie's met Kiss and the Ramones and Sharknado, and crazy stuff happens in Riverdale over and over again, and it's still Archie, but. Stephanie, you said you were a fan of the Katy Keene stuff, or you remember reading a lot of the older comics. How was it, getting into the mindset of the current TV show and kind of seeing how much the characters had changed or been evolved for the current audience?
Yeah, well, the Katy of the comics is very glamorous and it's almost yeah. And almost superhuman in some ways, usually, of course, she has like her conflicts with Gloria and her foibles with her many suitors. But I remember looking up at Katy Keene in the comic and be like, oh, this is what an adult woman is. You are perfect. Everyone loves you. No problems. And in the Katy of the show, I feel like Lucy Hale has given us a character where you see like the mess that's also part of the glamour. And, Katy loves her hearts, and she also has such a wonderful heart. So it was so much fun to be part of like bringing more of that humanity to these characters that like are so beautiful and fashionable and shiny. But there's also something real there too that like reaches out for connection and hurts and learns. And, I moved to New York when I was 21 to be a star. So I really enjoyed being able to kind of be part of that narrative of like New York is this city where you can make your dreams come true, and maybe the dreams look a little bit different than you anticipated, but I felt like I was able to see a lot of myself in these characters too, which was really nice.
Yeah, and you are a star. Look at you now. You're here with us.
Yeah, look at me now.
Yeah, here you are. We've gotten some questions, and Beatriz asks, and I will not poo-poo this with my publishing knowledge, but is there a chance that all of y'all will join to create one book? And that's kind of an interesting concept, like a novel in stories. I don't know if there is a chance, but it would be fun. What do you guys think?
I feel like it's everyone doing their scary murders, and I'm here like, what's new for the fall fashions? Right? Tell me about the shoes, everybody.
I say, yeah, let's write like we can do like an anthology. Listen,
yes.
in A Werewolf in Riverdale, Betty Cooper is a bad werewolf hunting. And she needs a stylist. So I also see a perfect opportunity for Katy Keene to show up in my universe. So we'll do it.
I think it would be fun for like the horror versions and the real world or non-horror versions to suddenly come face to face. And real world Veronica is like, what's going on here? What is this fangs work? I don't like this.
Yeah, like Crisis on Infinite Archies, or just seeing the terrifying versions of themselves. Wow, we've gotten a lot of questions, so that makes my job easier. Cheryl Blossom herself asks, are there any plans for any more Riverdale prequel novels? A novel about the Blossom family would be amazing. So a little bit of self-service there. I can't confirm if there are any prequel novels, but there's a lot of fertile ground to cover. Caleb and Nicole, you can probably talk a little bit about the Riverdale stuff and any backstory you've been weaving into the novels.
I mean, I would love to write a Blossom-centric story, like 100%. So if my editors are listening and they're amenable, call me. I'm here. Like, I love the Blossoms. It can be a prequel. It can be a sidequel. It can be whatever. Like, I'm any story you want. I love Cheryl, like, all the time.
Awesome.
I agree. I'll write anything. Hand it to me. Just point me in a direction and I'll do it. I'm totally happy to just to put me in, coach. I'm ready to play.
Yes, I love it. I love the enthusiasm. From Jillian, who notes that Micol is writing the Riverdale comics, she wants to know, and this is for anyone on the panel, what's your interest level in writing comics? Are you fans of the genre? Obviously, you're fans to some degree, but what characters would you like to write in comic book form? And if you could visualize a collaborator too, that would be great. No pressure.
Sarah just wrote a graphic novel. I'm sorry, I'm like stalking you on this panel, Sarah. I apologize, but a graphic novel just come out. So
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's ties in with a graphic novel series called Fans, but but it is really exciting to do, and I do think that through working with Archie, I've gained this new appreciation for graphic novels and how like deep and scary they can be. I mean, I read Roberta's The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina graphic novels, which go even harder
It's
than the show.
amazing, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so when I was asked to do that, I was like, sure, I know about graphic novels. I mean, as Caleb said, Coach put me in. So that's been really fun, although it's about fencing, which I only did for one term and got my ass kicked by an 8-year-old. So at that point, I was like, oh, back to witchcraft, please, soothing witchcraft. I would love to do any of the characters, and but if we're asking you to pick an artist, there are just so many great ones that I don't know. Good.
As I was saying earlier, because my take on sort of the origin of Jughead and the Hunger, it has now diverged with what the series has established. They continued writing and they started talking about their backstory. While I was writing my own version of their backstory, I would be thrilled to write comics that sort of explored further into, that sort of built on what I have established and like sort of the story that I wrote, because I really enjoyed it. And I mean, I think that would be a blast. I would love to. I am such a fan of comics as a medium. Like I said, I was always a storyteller, but I also, art was sort of my first love, and to be able to marry those two things and tell stories in that way, I'm fascinated. I will at some point, I'll either write comics or I'll write a graphic novel. I'm gonna do it.
If only you guys knew somebody at Archie Comics that you could talk to.
Sexy Ghost Jughead, Succubus Cheryl.
Nice, yeah. What about you, Stephanie or Rebecca?
Yeah, I'm actually working on several graphic novels right now that I'm not allowed to talk about yet, but I've completely fallen in love with it as a writing form. It's so incredible. And it was something I never thought that I would have the opportunity to do. And now I'm obsessed with it and I kind of only want to do that. So yes, I would love to write comics in the Archie universe. As long as they're not too scary, I'm here for it.
Just fashion conscious. What about you, Rebecca?
Yeah, I'm taking, actually right now, I'm in university and I'm taking a comics course. So it's like the history of American comics. So I'm having like a crash course in everything to do with comics. I just read the Scott McCloud, Bible basically. So I'm getting very into it. So who knows, at the end of this, I may be dipping my writing toe into comics.
That would be awesome.
I really love Audrey Mock's covers for Vampironica.
Yeah, no, she's fantastic. She's one of my favorites. Just one of the holy trinity of a freelancer. She's fast, she's very good, and she's supremely nice. So we're getting more questions, which is exciting. Some of them are specific, and this one is for Micol. Was Veronica's friend Lexi from Get Out of Town actually Alexandra Cabot?
I wish I were that clever, but no.
You could just say yes.
You never know.
Yeah, you never know.
I don't, honestly, I would have to even go back to make sure that it wouldn't then like ruin canon somehow. So I would hate to say yes and then cause some kind of cascading ripple effect that, just undoes everything we knew to be true. So
an earth-shattering shift in Archie continuity.
Exactly. The butterfly effect undoes it all. No, but that was,
I appreciate it.
It was just a funny coincidence.
Okay. And Stephanie, does Alexandra Cabot make an appearance in your prequel novel? And if you don't have to spoil anything, you can just tease it if so.
We don't see her on the page, but she and Pepper almost cross paths, and we hear a bit about her from a waiter that will not surprise anyone who knows Alexandra Cabot.
Awesome. I love talking to writers, period, not just in this setting where it's very much about Archie, but I love to hear about influences, the books and the music and the shows that inspired you while you were working on your novels. Were there things that you kind of turn to creatively that always get you jazzed about writing, or certain things specifically with your most recent Archie work that kind of helped you along that you can talk about?
Well, I did a lot of reading about, which is, not only a throwback to the Wizard of Oz and Narnia, which I read when I was wee, and I was always madly into it. It was like, oh, you turn into a giant snake, and then you ensorcel a man, and you put him underground. Great, good career choice. But also like a lot of just essays on witchcraft and the ways in which like people are drawn to it. As Zora Neale Thurston said, grab the broom of freedom and drive off the beast of fear, which I think is great advice for witches and non-witches alike, especially in the times we live in.
Yeah, exactly.
I listen to a ton of musical theater, which is no hardship for me because I love musical theater. And over the course of the book, Jorge is auditioning for like a sexy new revival of Hello Dolly. And there would be times where I was just like listening to Put On Your Sunday Clothes like on repeat over and over again, just like bopping up and down.
Can you listen to music while you're writing? Because I find that like super distracting, and I'm jealous of people that can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can. It's like the complete silence that freaks me out. Like I need some chatter or music or something.
I agree. I have a Taylor Swift song per book.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I drop up plenty of Taylor Swift references in my books. It's like a badge of honor. What about everyone else? Not about Taylor Swift, but about.
Well, I definitely immersed myself in sort of like werewolf lore and fiction, because there's especially with and I bet Rebecca can probably back me up on this, because especially when it comes to like vampires and werewolves and these sort of beasts that have this tons of folklore that are across cultures and across history, there's so much to sort of draw on. But I, in addition to being a big Archie fan from my childhood, I've also been a big horror fan. And I went through a period of time where I was consuming all the werewolf media I could. So I had sort of a store on that. And there was a movie from the 1970s that I think very few people have seen, but it's called The Beast Must Die. And it is sort of it's werewolves, but And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. So it's a group of people brought to this, remote mansion by a millionaire who is going to discover who amongst them is the werewolf, and the beast must die. And I titled the second section of the book after this movie because it was something that I remembered from my teenage years as, like one of these definitive werewolf pictures like that, and like The Howling and some of these other things. So I had a lot of like old influences, like old movies. I really loved that sort of like the Wolfman, these like, the fog covered moors and like all that stuff that really to me like is the definitive werewolf, imagery.
Yeah, for sure. Anybody else have some really powerful influences while they were working on their books?
I mean, I think it's no secret that so much of Riverdale is influenced by specific tropes and oftentimes specific movies and books and TV shows and things like that. And so often, depending on what I'm working on, like when I heard about the main thrust of season 4 and Jughead going to boarding school, I said, oh, secret history. And my editor was like, yes, exactly. And so I, before I started writing that book, which was The Death of a Cheerleader, and it didn't even feature Jughead in school because it was about the cheerleaders, but I had to go back and reread the secret history, of course, which is amazing. And because it was Death of a Cheerleader, it was just an opportunity to go back and read Dare Me by Megan Abbott again, which was also amazing.
So good, so good.
I mean, generally, I read adult thrillers. I read a lot of upper YA thrillers, more adult lately. I'm not sure why, but I'm just so much more mature these days. But particularly when I'm writing a Riverdale, like I'm reading mysteries even more mindfully because I'm trying to pay attention to the plotting. And if and when it's based on something specific, like Get Out of Town was, of course, like any road trip. I mean, there's the jump scare with the cat who is actually Salem, like jumping in front of the car. It's the cabin in the woods. It's The Hills Have Eyes. It's all those things. So I'm always the reason I took the job in the first place is because I'd be watching and reading those things anyway. So this is just perfect synergy.
Yeah, I love how we always have to act like we do all this great research, but it's really the stuff we would be obsessing over anyway. Like most of the times when I write a crime novel about whatever, it's because that's what I've been obsessing over for the last 6 months, and I just need to get it out of my system. Did I miss anyone else to talk about influences before we?
I think Rebecca might do some vampire lore. I love a vampire lore.
That was like the hardest part because there are so many different vampire origin stories or, you know, I grew up, I'm like this was when I got the email that was like, it's called Vampironica. I was like, wait, what? So it's Vampironica? Okay. I read like the Christopher Pike Spooksville and like Point Horror, all the vampire stories, and like I watched True Blood and anything vampires. But you have to decide like, how do they transform? Like, how does it work? Are they dead? Are they undead? Are they coming back to life? What's happening? So I had to do like a bit of like narrowing that down and really honing that. But other than that, I wrote it really quickly. So I think about like 2 weeks for my first draft. So I was just like fully like in the voice, in the head, everything was like right there. And I had a nice playlist to go with it, but this one specific song called Cheerleader by Sir Baby Girl, and it just absolutely nailed it for me every time.
I'm just blown away that you wrote the draft so quickly.
Thank you.
I'm like, I think I felt a shiver through my spine. Caleb, did you have to? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What's that?
I was about to start my degree, so I was like, I cannot. And, you know, I haven't been in education for like a decade. And I was like, I don't think I can handle both things at once. And I can write, so I will write this fast and worry about everything else later.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Caleb, did you rewatch Silver Bullet? Was that in your kind of werewolf movie marathon? Because that movie scared the hell out of me as a kid.
You know,
it's probably not a good movie. I haven't watched it since then. So.
I know. Well, that was the thing, is that I watched it a long time ago, but I think the only movie that I rewatched was The Howling.
Wow.
Because that, to me, like that was such like that and like the Thriller music video, which is supposed to mirror like the
essential werewolf viewing. Yeah.
Exactly. Essential werewolf viewing.
Yeah. Just the top of the top. But I want to remind our viewers that you can ask us questions. You can just type your questions into the YouTube chat, and I will do my best to get to them. Also, if you want to pick up these great books and pre-order the two that are coming out on November 1st, you can do it through Children's Book World LA. Rebecca, we have a question for you. Which personality traits from the comics or shows were the most important to include in your Veronica? Did you put any of your personality into her?
Should I put any of myself into her? Love of a good outfit. Got some sleeves going. Like her love of like her friends. That's quite me. I love my friends. That was really important to me. But from the show, I think Veronica has such like, she's got like not quite an acid tongue, but there's something there. Like she can be sweet, but if you cross her, you know, she's not quite as dark as Cheryl. Like Cheryl's gonna absolutely cut you down, but Veronica can like go toe to toe with Cheryl. That was really important to me, and to get also, you know, her perfect way of always saying daddy, you know, and the pearls, and she's very put together and perfect, but with a little bit of an edge. So that's what was really important to me to get in there.
Awesome. And Sarah, we have a question for you. Do you have any other more Sabrina stories? I know you can't confirm if one is coming or not, but are there more stories you'd like to tell in that world?
Definitely. I love the world. I have all of this new witch lore in my head so much. I try to make people do them in real life, but they won't. Like, apparently if you put lemons in your doorway, that will protect you from evil. And so I put it in the books. I had Nick Scratch, Sabrina's bad boy love interest, put lemons in the doorways of Harvey, her good boy love interest. And he's like, why? Why have you made my house into a sangria? And he's like, it's for your protection.
It's for your own good.
And I was like, I could do that. You could just dry some lemons and just put them up. I mean, better safe than never. It's like, no, you will not do the lemon thing.
I mean, it's worth a try. It's worth a try. And look, this Halloween panel would not be worth its salt, its weight in salt. If I didn't ask you this one essential question, what would you dress up as? What would your Halloween costume be if you had to pick a costume from the Archie-verse?
My daughter already told me I have to do Vampironica, so.
You should, yeah.
Teeth are uncomfortable.
TBD.
I mean, I love the idea. It's something like the fangs I think will be uncomfortable, but
yeah,
I'll sacrifice because I'm an excellent mother. So
yes, please advise.
I'll let you know.
Yeah. What about everybody else?
My husband and I already have been Betty and Jughead before, so I feel like I can't bring that one back again.
Please tweet those photos.
Yeah. Okay, yes, I will do that. But I feel like now that I have a 2-year-old, if I'm Sabrina and he's Salem, that's just a good
awesome.
look.
I thought you were going to say no, and I was like, please do that. Yeah. Yeah, most of I'm not a Halloween person, but most of my costumes are driven by my 4-year-old and now our 1-year-old. So they are like the Halloween council of the house.
So when I published my debut novel, my little brother, as sort of a congratulatory gift, he bought me a copy of Archie-verse Predator, and I would want to do that.
Yes.
I would want to do an Archie and a Predator.
That would be fantastic.
That would be my like couple's costume.
What about everybody else?
I think
Sarah, you came in costume. I'm impressed.
I did, but foolishly not an Archie costume. But so I guess I'd still have to go with Sabrina, especially as I come here, Tat. Do have the Salem accessory now. First time. He
seems dubious about this whole affair.
I mean, yeah, I did dress him up in a little tuxedo for this event, and he's just mad at me.
Yeah.
But I love a zombie, so an Archie in the Afterlife zombie costume appeals. Or maybe
fantastic.
Like all the cool kids.
Yes. What about you, Rebecca?
I've got a very specific. I can't remember what season it's from, but when Alice comes in and all of her serpent regalia with her, I rewatched that clip so much because it's just so cool. She's like in her flowing play suit dress combo and the jewels in the hair, everything is perfect. That would be my ideal book.
Oh, that would be amazing. So like I threatened and warned before the panel started, we do have a little bit of a lightning round, but I want to, if anyone has any other questions, you can throw them in. We have about 10 minutes or so left to close out the panel. So now's your last shot. And also, please, please, please pick up these great books. It's such an amazing array of talent. It's really been awesome to just chat with you guys and kind of talk about Archie and your inspirations and influences. But before we go into the, I guess, the Jeopardy phase of the panel, I want to hear what you're working on next, and I also want to hear something that you've read recently that's gotten you super jazzed, something you'd like to plug that's in the YA space, whether it's another novel or another comic book or just something that you read recently and it just blew you away.
Now we all think. Now we all.
Yeah. ...
Well, what's next for me is Riverdale, the Poison Pen, which comes out. I'm sorry, my phone. Because I don't have any of my stuff with me, but that comes out in November, and it is a tie-in with the show, and it is all of your favorite characters who are being stalked by an anonymous letter writer who knows all of their darkest secrets and is threatening to release them unless they all, perform a series of terrible tasks. So that was awesome. That was very fun for me.
It's a great book.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun. That was also when for me, I think I wrote that in about 5 weeks, which I'm not on Rebecca's level, not yet, but that was a very fast. That was it was a fast drafting for me, but it was and Micol addressed this also with regard to writing for a show. It's a moving target because as they change stuff on the ground, it changes everything that we're doing. And then on top of that, because of COVID, when they shut down production, it was sort of like, they kept telling me, they were like, here's how we're going to end the season. And this is what you have to be writing towards. But then, of course, they ended the season before they finished filming all those episodes. So then suddenly I had to sort of figure out how I was going to write towards plot twists that haven't aired yet, so that the story will still make sense when you read it before those episodes air, but also after those episodes air. So that was a big challenge.
You made it work. Yeah, that's one of the fun wrinkles of licensed publishing.
Yeah.
What else are you guys working on? Or what are you reading that's gotten you really psyched recently?
Well, Vanessa Lem wrote a book about a girl who's a monster and a boy who's a monster hunter that's not out yet, but I think you guys should look for it. I love monsters and monster hunters. In fact, I was just thinking about the moment in Riverdale where Cheryl is basically Red Riding Hood and stalks a killer through the streets. And I was like, she's ready to hunt vampires or werewolves. We need to get on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been very deep in Archie, and I've been rereading the Mark Waid, is it Fiona Staples or Staple?
Yeah.
So the reboot from, is it 20? I'm going to get it wrong, but from quite recently.
Yeah.
And I read the letter at the front of the first volume of the reboot. And I think this falls in the YA space. And it said that they had been tasked with modernizing Archie, but keeping him recognizable, i.e. it shouldn't be Riverdale. And this was like before Riverdale even existed. And I settled in expecting to enjoy it, but not necessarily to be as taken with it as I am with Riverdale, because I do love things that are so over the top. And it is perfect. I mean, if you said make Archie modern, but also keep him Archie, like it's all there. So if you're not familiar with that, I recommend that. And then also the new original graphic novels that you guys are doing. And obviously I'm not being self-serving, specifically Benny and Veronica, Bond of Friendship. I loved it. My daughter stole it from me and I had to like wrestle it back from her. So that got physical, but, so that's what I've been reading and that's what I've been really excited about. And then my next, my first original graphic novel, because the other one was a collection of comics, will be coming. I still don't remember what month it is. I'm sorry, Alex, but it will be coming
February.
Year from Archie.
Yeah, February. Yeah.
It will be coming.
Riverdale: The Ties That Bind, which Micol is writing, and Tom Patilli, who's a fantastic artist and has done a lot of Riverdale stuff for us, is drawing. Did I miss anyone? Rebecca, what are you working on next? And Sarah.
I'm working on something that I can't talk about. Maybe, and also some random stories. I'm in a period of experimentation.
That's great. Yeah.
But who knows how it's going to work out? But and a book I read recently, I actually listened to the audio. It's called "I Killed Zoe Spanos" by Kit Frick, and the audio is like a full cast with a podcast, true crime podcast, like embedded in it, that I would forget that I was listening to a book when I was listening to the podcast parts, and it would skip back to a chapter, and I'd be like, "Whoa, what's going on?" But that was great. It's, I think it's kind of loosely based on Rebecca, but I could be.
No, it is. It is.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Cool.
It is. Yeah.
I am
what about you, Stephanie?
Also working on nothing that I can talk about, but I'm feeling very excited for Katy Keene to come out in November, especially just to talk to other fans who really miss the show, because I do. And I'm just like, I'm excited to talk more Katy with other people who love her as much as I do. And a book I read recently that I loved was You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. I love prom books, and it just has like all of those good feels that you want.
Oh, awesome. So I think everyone's going to leave this panel with a nice list of potential books to buy from Children's Book World, which is our bookstore partner for this event. We have one more question. You guys have been spared the lightning round because you've just given such thoughtful answers, and we're kind of up against the clock. But this is a fun one to close on. What is the strangest property you'd want to combine with Archie? We've seen a lot of weird stuff. You know, like I said, Sharknado, Archie meets Kiss, Archie meets Ramones, Archie, Predator. But there's so much great IP out there. What is the wackiest one you would like to see and maybe you want to write?
Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, I would read that. Yeah.
6 Feet Under meets
Hmm.
the dead of parallel Riverdale.
That would
I
be
don't
cool.
even think that this is too wacky, but I would like to do like House on Haunted Hill meets Archie, because they had ghost stories back in the original Archie. They occasionally did these sort of like haunted house things, and those are always my favorites. So I would love to do something like that.
Yeah, there were always, in classic Archie, there were always a few stories that kind of got really edgy and dark, when they go hiking and get lost and suddenly they're stranded. It was really jarring to me as a kid. But yeah, I think that could work for sure.
I feel like Archie meets the Great British Baking Show. Everyone's just like making those good cakes, having a nice time.
Very polite crossover. Anybody else with some crazy ideas?
Well, I mean, other than sitting and waiting for Sabrina Part 4, which is a lot of what I do, I'm now thinking a lot about, Caleb mentioned mix of the supernatural and Agatha Christie, my love, and I'm like, a murder mystery, especially with Agatha Christie, because Agatha Christie really knew her poisons. She worked as a pharmacist before she was a writer, and also later in life, her husband cheated on her, so she, as you do, faked her own death. And he was in jail for her murder for a week. And then she was like, whoops, here I am, what?
Just kidding.
I feel like...
Have you seen the Vanessa Redgrave movie from 1970? I want to say, oh no, wait. Yeah, it was like 1979. It's called Agatha. It's really
so good. But also The Poisons of Agatha Christie is a great book. Just everything you can get your hands on. So a murder mystery combined with the supernatural would always be my bag. Hopefully I get to write one of these days. And
that's awesome. Well, we have reached the end of our hour. This was so much fun. It was so cool to talk about not only your books, but what inspired you and what your Archie kind of origin stories are. And, I am in the very special position of getting to read all these books before they come out. And I try to just enjoy them, but also I have to remind myself that I'm doing this as an official of Archie and kind of make notes. But for the most part, it's been an amazing experience. And it's really, really cool to see it, the breadth of the Scholastic and Archie partnership. So thanks everybody for coming. This has been a really great panel, and keep your eyes peeled for the next Riverdale book, the first Katy Keene book. And please make sure you order some of these amazing titles from Children's Book World. And thank you so much for coming. Take care, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
bye.